Attention, please. Eastern Airlines Flight 19, now ready for departure.
Welcome aboard the Walt Disney World Express monorail. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're entering the vacation kingdom of the world.
There's enough land here to hold all the ideas and plans we could possibly imagine. We call it Epcot. Will be our experimental prototype city of tomorrow.
Welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast, taking you back to the vacation kingdom of the world, the way it was, and the way it is in your memories.
All right, welcome back, everyone. This is the official episode number 1 of the Retro Disney World Podcast. Tonight, our episode is called Planning for Tomorrow, and we're going to be diving into all sorts of goodies all about Tomorrowland, its design, and the early years in the space race era, if you will, with rockets and all sorts of good stuff. But before we get to that, I want to welcome the crew. How, JT, Brian, welcome aboard for the night. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing good. How are you?
Good to be back.
Good. These intros should be a little shorter than last time, right?
Of course.
I don't know if we bored any listeners last time, but we're...
Most assuredly.
Exactly. How are you doing tonight? You good?
Doing good.
All right. So we're going to get right into it this time around. We do have some corrections and comments from the last episode that I know some people had emailed us on and had some questions. One thing is we thank you for listening and thank you for all the feedback you gave to us. It's been great. And one thing we did want to let you guys know is we do apologize for the pops and sounds and clicks that the last podcast had. We did use a different recording method. Now we're trying 2 different types of methods to see a way we can get that audio out to you a little better and a little clearer. So hopefully this sounds better to you, and if it doesn't, please let us know. Another update from last week is Brian touched on Roy's cabin, which, Brian, that's kind of become one of your little favorite things to bring up, I think.
Every episode
we're going to interject Roy's cabin in there at least once. Hal has been doing some research. Brian's been doing some research. I uncovered some things, and we do have actual documentation from Disney admitting that there was a fishing lodge on property, and we've got some aerial photography coming. So that's going to be another podcast, but the fable of Roy's cabin, there is a bit of a bit of truth to it that we've uncovered, and we're going to discuss that. A correction from last week, too. I have to apologize. I pronounced Tom Magliazzi's name incorrectly regarding the upcoming, when we're talking about the audio puzzler. So apologies to that. And 2 other last items. We had touched base on Kodak film pricing. Now, Brian, you went out, you said, Todd, you said it was about $10, $12, something like that. You went out and you did a little bit of research on the pricing, correct?
Yeah, we were just in talking about the fact that it was an expensive thing to take a 3-minute film,
right?
Which is why the content of them sometimes is very quick, short bursts of things instead of what we're used to with video and digital stuff, being people's dinner,
right?
And how long their food took to steam, etc. So we had gone back and taken a look at what some of the things were in today's dollars,
right?
And what it came back as is most of the film, whether it's silent or with sound, the silent stuff was around $16 or $17 for a 3-minute reel.
And that's in today's dollars.
That's in today's dollars.
Yeah,
That's because you hear like, oh, back then it was $6. Oh, that's not a big
not
deal.
bad.
Well,
Yeah.
No, in today's
just
dollars,
for inflation.
For inflation all the time. That's right.
I tell you, I refer to the inflation calculator on the internet at least once a week to put something into perspective. But
there we go.
And then the film with sound, again, another 3-minute reel, was about $25.
Yeah.
Which it's a fair amount of money for 3 minutes of film.
Right. So $9.35 back then, including processing, which you had to send away and wait for. So yeah, if you think about that, $25 for 3 minutes. Now you got what, a 64 gig card you throw in your camera.
Right. And and even in the 80s, I mean, a blank video cassette might have been $9.95, and you had 2 hours of video recording.
Oh, well, that's if you use the best mode. If you could squeak 8 out of it, but it didn't look good.
But your
Super
battery
long
would never
play.
last that long.
Yeah, ELP. That's right. The other item that Brian you also brought up last time was the lifetime pass, and we're going to do some research on that.
We've
But
picked up some bits and pieces. A lot of it anecdotal so far because we haven't gotten stuff in writing. But what we have picked up in bits and pieces, it appears that it was offered like the Black American Express card. You had to be selected for it. It wasn't something you could apply for.
Really?
So they somehow people were selected. The anecdotal stuff we've read is $500,000 at the time. Now remember, admission to the parks was $6. So
right. Yeah.
I mean, people paying $500 or $1,000 in the early '70s. It'd be like somebody. I'm not going to do the inflation.
Yeah, don't
Inflation
don't
calculator.
It's a lot of money.
You could do that for next podcast
yes.
corrections.
So eventually we'll find our white whale and discover some firsthand information of someone who either purchased one or someone who at least has some information about owning one.
There we go. So all right, well, you can get on that, and Hal and I will get on the Roy's cabin, and if anybody has any questions on Kodak film processing from the 80s, let us know. And just so you know, those prices were from 1981. I should have put in there. So, all right, well, enough with the catch-up banter, so to speak. Hal is really going to kind of highlight here this next segment. So our main topic for this week, for this month, we call it Planning for Tomorrow. Hal, you have been, from your Twitter feed, you've been basically digging through things, I think, for a week or two now. You've got all sorts of awesome photos, your own personal little model of Tomorrowland that you made, I saw today. I can't wait to hear what you've got. I've got my stack of little notes here and things I'd like to comment on, but let's turn it back all the way back to when Tomorrowland was in a state of questionable design, so to speak, right? What was it going to be from the beginning?
So let's take a quick round robin. So Brian, what is your quintessential Tomorrowland attraction?
It would have to be, for me, Carousel of Progress.
Okay. JT?
Space Mountain.
Todd?
People Mover, man. People Mover.
All right. So wild guess, how many of those were running on opening day?
I know
none.
I was going to say, I know the answer. But
Zero, yes.
So opening day, there were literally 2 attractions in Tomorrowland. The Grand Prix Raceway and the Skyway from Fantasyland. Everything else was still like under construction. So one of the questions that I always had is like, well, how did it get that way? Because if you figure that Disneyland's Tomorrowland redo opened in '67, it should be a slam dunk. They've done Tomorrowland. It should be very easy to just jump in and do a brand new Tomorrowland and copy and paste it in Walt Disney World, but that absolutely didn't happen. And if you look back at blueprints between 68 and 71, things are constantly shifting back and forth where there's Holiday Land. And if you remember anything about old Disneyland, you know what Holiday Land was. Like, do you guys have a vague recollection of what that? So Holiday Land was this parcel that was next to Disneyland that they didn't have anything to do with. So they just kind of threw some playgrounds and stuff in there and had some corporate events in that space. So Holiday Land shows up on the blueprints because they obviously haven't figured out what's going on. You see that wacky Space Mountain
with the towering.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think I called it like it was like a circus tent or something like that.
Yeah, with a circus tent with rockets. So you see that come on the plan. You see that change slightly on the plan. You see an Autopia instead of the Grand Prix.
Right, with the actual split, right? The roads were going to split rather.
Yeah, you saw a clover
together.
leaf with then like a long snake, and in some of the renderings you see some waterfalls and things going on over there. So
I always feel we kind of got slighted on the Autopia in Tomorrowland in Disney World.
I kind of have a
Especially
conspiracy
since
theory.
Birthday
Yeah.
And I haven't seen this laid out yet. So if anybody has actually read anything solid about this, please contact us because at this point I'm in the world of conjecture. But as we talked about a little bit last week, a lot of this was all reliant on sponsorship. So most of the Magic Kingdom, except for Tomorrowland, was pretty much already covered. But once you got to sponsors in Tomorrowland, I think people came in and out. And as that happened, we see these attractions come on and come off. So For example, Flight to the Moon was never supposed to be there. If you go back to the early plans, they had purchased all the computers at Walt Disney World from the RCA Corporation, which you'd say, well, RCA made computers? Well, they did. They were actually just like IBM. They are one of the largest manufacturers of like mainframe computers at that time. So they had an option to do an attraction there. And there was one that John Hench kept pitching called Alice in Computerland, which, depending on how you read it, might have been attached to Space Mountain at one point. But I've actually seen plans where, in place of the two Flight to the Moon theaters, there was a thing called Computerama, which, according to an article I read with Marty Sklar, they were going to try to use that same sort of theater setup with the screen on the top and the screen on the bottom, and then the screens on the two sides, and then take you into like an intriguing journey into the microscopic world of the computer.
Ooh.
So it was
like
kind of Tron before Tron.
Right.
And I guess the issue with that is RCA just kind of really wasn't interested, but the chairman saw the renderings of Space Mountain and said, ooh, I want that. So
they wanted what was going to be the original plans of 200 feet tall.
Right.
It would have dwarfed Cinderella's castle. And
that itself has a really weird backstory, because that ride started out as something in Disneyland, and in order to get the capacity they wanted, allegedly they had started with an 8-track plan with a single car, which then got budgeted down to a 4-track plan, which they actually were going to contract that Aero company that did the Matterhorn and a bunch of the other Disneyland rides. So they actually have a full-blown model of that, and then Disney was just going to figure out how to cap the thing off with like the crazy circus tent stuff. And it kind of got canceled for Disneyland as Walt Disney World was coming online. So then they planned to premiere it at Walt Disney World, but budgets got cut back, and my assumption is the RCA budget was not as big as they would have needed. And at the same time, there were some problems with some of the ride mechanisms that Aero Development wanted to work. So they wanted to move to just a gravity-only fed system, and they figured, well, we'll just put more people in cars. So then they took it down to 2 tracks, but kept the capacity the same by having more people per car and having 2 cars attached to each other instead of the single car like the Matterhorn has.
Now, I think the single car one was that was the one where it actually went outside, right?
Yeah.
That totally went outside the Space Mountain. That you can still see the people moving in, but they're like whizzing around up at the top. They're coming down the bottom, around the side. I don't know when this one dates to, but if anybody wants to.
And you can just imagine the practicality of an indoor-outdoor roller coaster in Florida.
Yeah, that would be
during the rainy days. So that's how we kind of ended up with that Space Mountain. And there were apparently elaborate plans that Claude Coates had for sort of like a rotating hub inside of Space Mountain. So it looked like the astronauts were kind of stuck to the gravity wheel, kind of like what you have in Mission Space now.
Okay.
But that just proved to be wildly expensive. But they were able to like keep his plans for audio animatronics for the post show, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. I think the reason for the switch from the Autopia to the Grand Prix is because, Goodyear sponsored the People Mover in California, which used rubber tires with motors to push it along. The Autopia in California was sponsored by Richmond Oil, which did not exist on the East Coast. So they would not have been a good sponsor for that. Gulf Oil could have been a replacement, but they chose to sponsor the Hospitality House instead, which was a good fit for them from a brand perspective, because their whole thing was setting up a series of service stations where it was safe to stop and go to the bathroom and get maps and directions. So that was actually a really good brand fit for them.
This is vaguely sounding like the 1964 World's Fair. Who's going to sponsor what pavilion?
Yeah.
It's the same problem. I shouldn't say problem, but.
So what I think ended up happening is Disney needed some attractions in Tomorrowland. So then they started to try to make some compromises in order to make that work out. So they get Goodyear to sponsor Autopia. That story of driving in California doesn't make any sense. But in the late 1960s, Goodyear is associated with something, which is Grand Prix Racing. They're the largest tire manufacturer, and they do all kinds of sponsorship for Grand Prix Racing. So, ta-da!
Yep.
The Autopia becomes a Grand Prix. And they theme it down to such specificity that I think this is a fact that somehow has been lost over the years, but the different turns and things within the Grand Prix Raceway are actually allegedly modeled after different racetracks. So when you come out of the starting gate and make that left with sort of the high embankment,
Yep.
that's supposed to be representative of Indianapolis.
Interesting.
So
well,
there's
you do go over the brick too. They have their own.
Yeah,
The
well, that
brick,
was,
yeah.
which I think that was added when they like redid it a couple of years ago.
Okay.
But back then there were themes to Monaco, to Watkins Glen, to Indianapolis, as we mentioned, to Mazda. So there were these paintings on the inside of the track for each one of those tracks. So allegedly there's a little chunk of those. So I haven't figured out yet which turns equal which tracks, but that's supposed to be like, oh, we pulled a chicane from here and we pulled a high embankment from there. So it really gave you that fake Grand Prix feel.
Did you know did they have any advertisements or any little posters on the side saying what it was?
Well, like I
feel
said,
like there still aren't there posters of racetracks like around?
if you look down into, and of course, no one we'll have to post this so that way people can see it.
That's right. Take a note, JT. There we go.
But on the back wall, as you were facing out, they had these huge paintings, and each little, each like 10-foot section of wall had a painting on it from one of the other tracks. Started on one side and worked all the way to the other side. So and they're all very 70s groovy looking.
Oh yeah, I love the design of that, the grandstands and the little walkway over. I think that whole area, and it hasn't really changed either, other than the track layout we know has been shortened considerably since.
Yeah,
well, they're little 70s Corvettes too. That's the other thing. If you didn't notice that, they're like the third generation Corvette, like real tiny versions.
And that was a real interesting thing because I read a while back that Bob Gurr styled those, and he actually was friends with the guy that ended up styling the Corvette.
Mm-hmm.
And his claim was that they both developed that idea simultaneously, not talking to each other. And that wing at the front sort of organically happened because that was just the design movement
That's
at the time.
the way it is. That's interesting.
So that's pretty, that was pretty.
It's odd because they moved to that design in 1968 of that design of Corvette. So in that time period, I mean, it was the new hot, thing, but yeah. That's weird.
I like the fact that those cars haven't changed over the years too. We're still, they've painted them, obviously some new fiberglass shells now and then, but yeah, it'll be a sad day when they go to electric. But I guess the cast members running it will thank them.
That is a pretty. There's very few pure things left in the Magic Kingdom.
Yeah.
And that, other than the paint jobs, it's like that's pretty much the same attraction as day one.
Do we know how much we actually lost? We lost. Twice it's been cut down. Once when Mickey's Birthday Land came in around 89. We lost again a little bit when the new Dumbo was built. Not a lot, but enough to, it made that last turn shorter. I wonder if we ever have any measurements of how much was lost.
Yeah, and the weird thing is it was actually extended too, because when it opened in 71, for some reason they didn't feel it was long enough, so they actually made it bigger in 73.
Interesting.
Only to cut it back later on.
Yeah, and then in the middle of that, we can't forget, is where the Skyway would come down and make its 70-degree, whatever it was, turn towards Tomorrowland. I believe it came down somewhere in the center was the little cabin, or somewhere around that area, I believe.
That's right. There was nothing stranger than riding the Skyway down, and then all of a sudden there's some guy standing there.
Whereas the cast member did nothing but watched you turn 70
maybe
degrees.
Give you a little push or something in his polyester outfit.
Exactly. And then you go. But the funny thing is you go back up really, really high for what? Another couple hundred feet, and you're right back down again. It was such a short little turn.
Yeah, I think there's been some speculation that at some point someone thought that there might be a Matterhorn that would go in that spot someday.
So they would go right through it.
So I don't know how. I hadn't seen anything with that actually in the plans, but allegedly they left. I've heard conflicting reports that they either left room for a Matterhorn or there was no room for a Matterhorn. So.
All right. Well, so far we've talked about and I'm reading this directly, the spine-tingling Space Mountain through the cosmos, where you would pilot a spacecraft. That's coming from some of this great old literature. You've got the Grand Prix Raceway. Now, let's talk about Mission to the Moon, Mission to Mars. I mean,
okay.
First of all, for those listeners of the younger generation, we have to this and also the Star Jets. I mean, this is a time when Apollo. We did the Apollo Soyuz was around 72, 73. So when this thing was being thought about, we've been to the moon. We're now docking in space. You know, and we're, you know, it was space race was kind of over, but still going on. And you know, the NASA logo, the white spaceships, the red and the USA on it was just prominent in everybody's mind and every child at the time. So I remember going into the ride. You get hurled in and you meet Mr. Johnson and his slick silver suit that looked like it could, or a gown that could protect him from a fire from afar, and all those, you know, wonderful 70s technology there, blipping lights and the people moving. But that was, for its time, that was a pretty decent attraction.
Yeah. Should we do like a little walkthrough of the ride so you can
let's
try to describe it for people? Because
good,
obviously Stitch is there now, and before that it was Alien Counter, and before that it was these other rides. So it opened up finally, I think in December of 71 as Flight to the Moon. So as I was saying before, with that back and forth of trying to get a different ride in there, I don't think they wanted to put it in there, so they finally gave up and said, okay, fine, we'll put Flight to the Moon in there, which was actually an update from the 67 Disneyland. But it actually ran unsponsored. They didn't get McDonnell Douglas to sponsor that because I don't think they had time to try to get them because they really didn't expect to have it there. So but basically you'd walk into the waiting area. There were some pictures on the wall, and this was true of when it became Mission to Mars later on too, but there wasn't a lot to do except kind of watch the countdown clock to your next flight and just kind of wait for that to happen and maybe some mood music.
There's really not much to do now. Anyway,
was it the same waiting room that you're in now?
Oh, yeah, the rooms haven't, I don't think we've changed
for the
at all.
most part. The roof line on both sides sort of had this sort of an undulating wave at the top, and the colors were like pretty groovy 70s.
Right. But the layout itself.
The layout itself, yeah. You had, so right now I think they've sort of like cut off the windows except for like hexagons.
Yeah.
On one side, those used to be giant plate glass windows, so you could actually look outside while you're waiting and see people walking by and wish that you were out there instead of waiting for the ride that you're about to go on.
Love the air conditioning.
Yes. So you'd have 3 doors open up. You'd wander into the large room, which is pretty much where the pre-show is right now for Stitch. And then, and you'd have giant plate glass. And then, as you said, you'd kind of look out on a controlled room. And at first, in 71, it was all staffed by men because, you know, men did these important things, not women. And you had Dr. Johnson, who presumably was named after the Johnson Space Flight Center in Texas. So that makes sense. And he would, when it was Flight to the Moon, he would run you through, they'd show you sort of like another rocket launch and rocket reentry and sort of explain some basic facts about rockets and what was going on a little bit with NASA. This was set in the future, so the concept was this was a time when people would just, you know, casually hop on a moonliner and jump off to the moon and see things.
Yeah, minimal safety procedures or anything. Just go.
Yeah.
Was this on like one big TV or little TV station through?
That's a great question. Yeah. So you had sort of like in the back you had a row of computers with tiny monitors, sort of desks like you would see at Kennedy Space Center back in the day. Then there was a second row with probably 2 audio, and that was staffed by like say 4 or 5 audio animatronic characters, just kind of pushing buttons and moving things back and forth. Dr. Johnson kind of stood in the middle there, and then there would be another row with like 2 or 3 figures on the left side and 2 or 3 figures on the right side, also running different things. And each one of the stations was named after, you know, I guess as realistically as possible. So there'd be like a Capcom and all the different things that you'd have on an actual space flight. So for the time, they really tried to make it as realistic as possible. Then on the back wall, they had a giant screen. So that way Dr. Johnson could call up, oh, okay, let me show you this thing and let's put it on the big screen. And the hostess, and they were always hostesses because assumably they were like stewardesses on an airliner. A live hostess had a little CB radio sort of microphone and would shoot Dr. Johnson questions and then he would answer back. So it was totally sexist, and that impressed slightly when it became Mission to Mars, because there actually was one female scientist then. So there was a guy that was pulled out and replaced by a woman, because by now it was 75 and things were a little hipper. So we did get a lady in there. It was then sponsored by McDonnell Douglas. And in this case, now it's like they're trying to show you a little bit more futuristic, but they had some footage from Skylab and from some of the Mariner probes that they could play up on the big screen, so you could actually see people in a weightless environment. And
Right.
I guess it's as cool as it could have been for, the early 1970s.
Now, there's some retro aspects of this that I have to call out that, are ingrained in my head from watching this. First of all is the countdown timer. You mentioned that. I'm sure that there's probably people thinking it's these little LED lights counting down. No, I don't think they were Nixie tubes, but I believe they were the flip type, right? They were the flip type like you would see in a train station.
Kind of in those 70s clock radios.
Exactly. Yeah, I had one next to my bed lit up by a nice amber light.
Dimming every day.
Super high tech at the time.
Exactly. But and I remember them, counting down and seeing all that stuff. So that room actually really hasn't changed. It's still multi-tiered, right? You would stand in the back, was a little bit taller than the people people standing in the front. And yeah, as you point out, the footage, it's interesting when they start to talk about the flight that you're going to take. They show this rocket taking off, and it looks like a really squatty Apollo. I was always wondering what that footage was. Do you know how was that Skylab?
Actually,
do you remember that?
They actually. Now, one of the things that they did very well was they did a remarkable job on some of the special effects.
Yeah,
because that stuff was all fake.
Right, and it just looked awesome. I was like, which Apollo mission was this?
Yeah.
It looked like an Apollo spacecraft, but it was really, really squatty, and I never knew what it was. But
there was a very iconic shot of it sitting on the launch pad that looked absolutely realistic.
Right, and it would get you every time.
Yeah, so well done.
Now,
done,
when that
gentlemen.
changed to Mars, I don't think they ever modified some of that footage, right? It was really the internals that changed, and some of the spiel changed on the...
More or less it stayed the same, and the worst part of it was the one gag that ran through the whole thing was that an albatross would come in for landing and cause... all these alarms would go off, and everyone would be concerned, and then when they show this albatross, like stock footage probably from one of the Disney True Life adventure films, crash landing, and oh, that silly albatross gets us every time, which really, I'm sure, instilled people's confidence in NASA. So
every time
when the radar's picking up stray birds, you've got a problem.
So good. Thank God those guys didn't work for NORAD when they set that up. Otherwise, we'd all be toast now.
So from there, how we would... The hostess would take us into one of two rooms, I believe. There are two total.
Yep. So you'd go through a hallway, and you could either split left or right into the two identical rooms. Once you got into those rooms, there was a row of about 6 or 7 seats in a full circle. And then you would have the thrilling experience of either staring at the floor or at the ceiling for the next 17 minutes.
Well, there was a little side footage, but not much. It was the progression, right? The progression.
Yeah, there was some. So in Flight to the Moon and Mission to Mars, they both started with a liftoff, so you could look down to the bottom and see sort of like fire and things taking off. If you looked up, you could see the sky then start to get darker and darker and darker.
Did you just say 17 minutes?
17 minutes.
Wow.
It was a long time to be sitting in a circle looking in darkness.
Epic journey.
Projections, yeah.
So at least they didn't clamp anything down on your shoulders then, though. That was the one.
There were no seatbelts. You just sat
there for 17 minutes.
No seatbelt for the whole journey. You didn't need it.
I don't even think the video, correct me if I'm wrong, Hal, but there was no video of Mr. Johnson or anybody. It was just all audio. It was only those two screens, the status on the sides, and that was it, right? There was,
so
you never even saw somebody come on and say, "Hey guys, how's everything going?"
Well, during Flight to the Moon, they would bring up on the side monitors a 3 astronauts that were on the surface at a moon at a lunar base, and the guy would talk to you through like, "Oh, well, here we're on the moon, and if my helmet were happened to crack, my blood would literally boil."
Oh my!
They're being truthful,
And watch this, and the one astronaut would like pick up an astronaut and throw him in the air to show how gravity was 1/6 of the Earth's, and then he'd land and he'd say, "Now that's extremely dangerous, so we should not really do that, because if that happened, I would be dead."
Even though we just did it.
Yeah. And if you want to see this, you can actually you can actually find there's a Walt Disney Presents show that has a segment of this. It is called, I'm looking up real quick, From the Pirates of the Caribbean to the World of Tomorrow. So you can actually see chunks of this film as it ran. It's on YouTube. Go check it out. It is marginally terrible, but
give you a sense of what it was.
Yeah, fun to watch from a retro perspective. For Mission to Mars, we actually did get an in-cabin narrator. His name was Third Officer Collins, and man, that guy is my hero because every day he would have to, in theory, do this over and over again. He was voiced by Pete Renaday, who is one of those like Disney voices that shows up everywhere. So that guy was also the voice of Captain Nemo on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. He was in a number of Disney films. Cool cat. And he said that was one of his best jobs because he actually just got to do his voice instead of having to do somebody else's voice. So if you hear Third Officer Collins, that's actually Pete Renaday's straight up voice. So enjoy that. And the premise of Mission to Mars was that technology had progressed far enough that we now had hyperspace. So you would get into the ship, take off, you'd go into hyperspace, and there was a really great explanation about how trying to reach Mars
takes months.
It was like hitting a golf ball out of the window of a moving train and getting it to land precisely in the window of another moving train, like so far away. So he would take you he'd give you a little overview of Mars. He'd show you how Olympus Mons was the size of Texas, and they had a little thing on the side screen that would overlay showing how that was in there. And then they would send out 2 rocket probes with video cameras to do a flyover. And they actually built this very elaborate model of the caldera of Olympus Mons at the Disney studio and did this sort of like fake motion control. I mean, they didn't have motion control cameras yet, but they got about as close as they could of doing this like beautiful little sweep over this model. And it looked really great, except for one thing. And if this footage is available on YouTube, everybody has to go look at this because it's just ridiculous. So as part of the storyline, as happens in many Disney attractions, something goes terribly wrong.
It always does.
There is a freak meteorite storm that's a 1 in 10,000 chance that happens every 17 minutes. But the awesome thing is
maybe actually a 7 every it could be a little 8.5 minutes, right? It could be between the two theaters going.
Yes, with the 2 theaters. So when the meteorites hit, watch the video because suddenly it changes from this very nice like elaborately filmed smooth thing to literally someone holding up a black and white picture of the caldera and shaking it back and forth. And right before the thing zaps out with static, you can actually see like the edge of the photograph as it comes out of the frame. So
it's like early Armageddon with Michael Bay, like overly shaky footage.
That is a thing of beauty. So the other special effect that Mission to Mars and Flight to the Moon had was hydraulic seats, which is why you have those hydraulic shoulder restraints in Stitch now. So when you took off, the seats would sort of push down, so your butt would kind of get down flatter in the chair, and then when you hit orbit, they'd pop up again. And that was supposed to give you the feeling like you were getting pushed down in your chair from all the G-forces. And I don't know. Again, for the 70s, I guess it was probably pretty great. As a kid, I vaguely remember liking it okay, but it was not a fantastic experience.
And we got to remember that played up into the early 90s. I think it was 92. It was still I don't want to use the word entertaining, but it was still taking some people in and at least taking the crowds and the
it ran for 17 years.
Yeah.
17 years.
Now, did they ever clean the film, like, or would it have hair on it, like, you know?
Well, I can tell you from pseudo personal experience that there were actually, so if you happen to go behind the scenes, not that I would suggest that, they used to have cabinets filled with extra films. So in case of a film breakage, they would actually pull it off, and they had 2 or 3 spare backups just sitting there ready to replace it with, which is one of the cool things about the way they had stuff set up. So sort of behind the scenes, it's like that. It literally ran on film. There were these giant movie projectors that had these sort of catches at the bottom that could collect the film in order to like pull it back up into the spool again so it could run in the loop. And, film's going to break eventually. It's really just a matter of time. So everything in the Magic Kingdom that had film behind it, there were spares upon spares just waiting to come out in case something should happen.
Hey, Hal, I've located a Mission to Mars film from 1992 here. So, and it shows the shaking. So we're going to have to post that one too. Take a note, JT. We've got
it.
I guess get this one ready.
So the other attraction, which was the opening day in Tomorrowland, was America the Beautiful. So that was a Circle Vision 360 film. That is also available on YouTube in a one-screen view. You can go look at that, but good luck getting through it because, if you think Circle Vision is tough to get through now, it was pretty brutal back then.
Imagine Symbiosis in Circle Vision.
Oh my gosh. It was a wonderful travelogue of America where you'd stop at, let's see, Annapolis and Williamsburg. You slowly kind of like trudge your way across Hawaii while one of those very typical, like, I'm a very pompous white man. I'm going to explain to you about freedom and why that's important. Just kind of roamed on for 16 or 17 minutes. Eventually you make your way to Hawaii. Again, at the time, perhaps it was very exciting.
Much smaller world back then.
Yeah.
There were only 3 channels on TV. People didn't fly everywhere with their kids.
Right.
Nobody ever went out to dinner. It was a different world.
Nobody ate.
How long did America the Beautiful run for? What was its run?
So that ran, I think, until 73 or 74.
Okay.
And then it got replaced with another film called Magic Carpet Round the World.
Yep.
Which ran for about a year, and then they pulled that because we were getting right on top of the bicentennial.
Mm-hmm.
And then they made a second film called America the Beautiful, which was I want to think. Actually, I could be wrong. It could be American Journeys. That might have been when they debuted American Journeys. Okay, someone's going to kill me on this one.
American Journeys came out in '84.
Okay, so it must have been another version of America the Beautiful that was all new.
Because Magic Carpet was only 1 year, I'm seeing here, 74, 75.
Putting you to sleep from all angles.
And then and then I think Magic Carpet Around the World came back after the centennial was over. Like maybe a couple years later.
You know what, Hal? I don't think you're the only one whose memory is foggy on this. If you talk to anybody in the retro world, and not many people ever even speak of these films.
And here's the thing. So you would think Tomorrowland would be the most exciting place for a kid to be in the Magic Kingdom.
Right.
But in I literally remember like not wanting to be anywhere near Tomorrowland. It was literally the most boring place for a kid.
Yeah.
Except for the Grand Prix, maybe.
Now, did you have hope? Like when you went, because when you look at those old pictures, it looks awesome. Like it's white and it looks clean and it looks like 2001: A Space Odyssey. But then you go and it's just, nothing to do.
Well, that's the thing. Kids aren't really into architecture.
Yeah, I get that, but it's just like it looks so like futuristic. I don't know.
There was construction going on. So like the saving grace and all this was in 72. They opened up If You Had Wings, and then it's like,
right.
Oh,
yeah, let's go and get on the Omnimover. Woohoo!
Because finally there's a ride, and a pretty damn kick-ass one too. So,
are you gonna get into? We're gonna go right into If You Had Wings.
We can pause.
Okay. So I was just gonna. Well, no, I want to. I was just gonna. This is a time, people, too. That do you guys remember way back when Disney used to have the official airlines? Right now, people remember why there was Delta, but back then Eastern Airlines, right? It was their official airline. Now I flew Eastern down there. I think when you went down there, it was almost a rite of passage that you had to take Eastern, or at least you felt like it. And they were the primary sponsor for getting that thing up. Now, I know Arrow developed it, the roller coaster company. We got, what'd you say? It was around 72, right, that it opened up. So that wasn't even there on opening day. And that was another delectful delight of rear projection. If you take El Rio de Tiempo and put it into a Omnimover ride, that's essentially what you have.
Oh, and honestly, if you think about it, they basically ripped off this ride in order to create El Rio de Tiempo.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's really a Rio de Tiempo is a redo of If You Had Wings.
Yeah.
It's a travelogue through rear projection, obviously the speed tunnel, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Go ahead, take it how you know it the best.
Oh, right. So I mean, so this is probably the end. I always say that, like, If You Had Wings, they basically took that idea and they turned it into El Rio de Tiempo and Maelstrom. But the difference is, with a very limited budget, they figured out what they could actually do really, really well with a tiny amount of money. They couldn't build a lot of audio animatronics. In fact, they could build no audio animatronics.
And they didn't have a lot of space either. I mean, the building itself, I mean, the way that those cars are crammed in there, the track's pretty tight. It's a very modest amount of space for what they're able to pull off. It's basically smashed up against the side of the 360
Circle
movie.
vision.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So and the puzzling part of this whole thing is it would kind of make sense where it's located and the way it's set up, that could have been Adventures Through Inner Space. But Monsanto ended up sponsoring the 360 movie, so they couldn't sponsor that. So they got Eastern to do it. But when you walked into the sort of the entrance area, it was set up exactly like Adventure Through Inner Space. You had the sort of like weaving back and forth of the queue. Instead of the mighty microscope, you had this globe with a hole in it with a jet plane attached to the side.
Right. I remember the little jet plane on there, right? Instead of going,
Yeah. So you would basically the front part of it is exactly the same as that, and probably by design, because that was done by the same designer. That was also a Claude Coates piece, and man, that guy just really figured out how to get the maximum amount of out of like 110 movie projectors and some plywood.
Yeah.
Which is really all that was in there.
Because there really was nothing much else to it. I mean, there really wasn't set designs as we, for those that remember Dreamflight, I mean, they actually built some things for that enforced perspective, but you really didn't have that in If You Had Wings.
It was remarkable in that it sort of like ran on this borderline between abstract and real. So, I mean, there were, sort of plywood fronted buildings and cruise ships and different things. And there were places where it got more dimensional and less dimensional. So, one of probably the most dimensional things I remember is, as you're cruising through the Mexico section, you kind of come underneath this stone head of like a Quetzalcoatl. And that was actually a full dimensional thing. And that was the one thing as a kid, it's like you always wanted to touch. You're like, I can reach out and I can touch that.
How dare I?
But it was brilliant because they took basically all of the stops on Eastern's Caribbean and South American routes and did one room devoted to each one of them. So it was a great sales piece for Eastern because it really touched on all the places that you would go and all the things that you would see. So much so as I think earlier this week, someone pointed out on Twitter an ad from the 1960s. And man, if there wasn't like 5 things that were direct shout outs to what ended up in If You Had Wings later on. There was parasailing in Acapulco. There was I'm trying to remember all. There was like kids playing soccer in front of a pyramid. It was all things that we ended up seeing later on in If You Had Wings.
Yep. Now, for those two who have listened to our opening theme song, it opens up with Eastern Airlines. That's part of the segment directly from the ride that we've added in there. So it's our little nod to If You Had Wings, which then how became If You Could Fly once I think in the 80s, late 80s sometime when Eastern pulled out.
Right.
That was pre-Delta coming on board, and we'll save Dreamflight for another episode. But the speed tunnel was cool. I remember going through that and exiting out. Now, when you exited the ride, off to your right was a little forgotten area, which we can touch base on, was the Tomorrowland stage, I guess is the best way to say it. Now, that area is now where Buzz, I think, comes out and signs autographs. It's to the right of Buzz Lightyear. And that was there for a number of years. I know they did all sorts of stage shows, and some of the film we're going to talk about later has some footage of people dancing. But, okay, we got to get to my favorite ride, the People Mover. And you got the Starjets. There's not a lot to talk about there in the Starjets other than how, I mean, they were mimicking Apollo missions from the gantry way. To me, it's incredible. I mean, they got the color, that rocket red orange. You would the feeling of going in there and having the doors close on you, going up to the top, walking out to your spaceship, and then going out there. And the design of the center spire of the rotation there just looked like something right out of NASA.
Oh yeah, that was totally taken from the Apollo launch vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, it had the black and white stripes, everything, USA.
Yep. And the cars were all sort of themed after some of the lifting body experiments that NASA was doing at that time. Yep. So in theory, it was all very cutting edge.
It was.
And and as a kid, it was very effective.
Yep.
I mean, it's about as close as you could probably come. And, for what is essentially like Dumbo up on a third floor.
It always seemed faster and obviously higher, but it always seemed faster and tighter.
It actually had just beautiful views of Tomorrowland.
Yeah.
I mean really phenomenal. Scary as hell, but
yeah.
Beautiful.
There's a Holy
views.
Grail 8mm film right there. Somebody holding, riding
on it, going around. Yeah. So now right around the base is where we have, the People Mover, which for me, that was the ride. For some reason, even to this day, when I go and visit, we gravitate towards Tomorrowland. I don't know why. I don't know. I always go to the right. I always go, and even my son says, "Let's go ride the People Mover." But I love that ride. I love the fact that that's another one that really hasn't changed. It's changed because of the rides that it goes through have changed. If we go back when that first opened, it was really that first sneak peek into Space Mountain that a lot of people had. That was when the lights were actually on somewhat. You could see the track. They've blackened out a lot of it now. That's where people got their taste of if you had wings, you could look down on that and look through if you could fly and Dream Flight. And I always enjoyed it. I always thought it was a great, cool way to. There was never much of a line. And then, as JT pointed out last time, hey, you had the moving walkway, right? The speed ramp needs more speed ramp. Yeah. So,
and so I mean, there's where we have that schism where Goodyear goes away because they changed up how it's done. It's actually a brilliant system, and it's still a brilliant system. This whole thing of linear induction motors. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the basic concept is there's an there are a bunch of electromagnets on the track. There is a big metal plate on the bottom of your vehicle, and there's as your vehicle is approaching, the electromagnet is on with a positive polarity, and it yanks you towards it. And as it passes over, it reverses the polarity and it pushes you off to the next one. So it's actually really, brilliantly simple. And I think one of the reasons it survived as long as it has is because it's probably incredibly reliable.
I was just going to say that, reliable. And also if you think about it, how efficient it can be, because when those aren't being used, they don't have to be turned on. So it knows that, maybe 5 or 6 ahead of it are turning on and the ones below are turning off. So, behind it are turning off. So yeah, incredibly efficient. And what are the moving parts? The wheels.
Yeah. Probably a good time to mention a couple of things. The system was under development when Walt was nearing the end of his life. There's a great picture of him on the lot at the studios where they built a segment of track in the parking lot, and there's guys out there riding in it to show that it would work. And then Disney actually tried in the 70s to develop this a separate business marketing this transportation system for use in commercial applications, transportation applications. They sold one. And it's still running today in the Houston airport, I think it is.
There it is.
So there's a People Mover in the Houston airport.
And I think they wanted to use the same thing in Lake Buena Vista. I'm assuming they were going to use the same linear induction, or at least something based similar to that.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I hate to wrap up Tomorrowland, but we do need to move on to our next segment. But How, I don't know. We've got a lot more on Tomorrowland to talk about because there's other phases, and we can come back and visit these more in depth. So we will eventually do another Tomorrowland episode. But it is time for viewer mail. So JT, what do you got for us this month?
Got a message from Mark and he was curious about Universe of Energy, and I don't remember this, and I don't even know if it's still the same, but he was wondering if we recalled or had any information on the smell that occurred when you entered the dinosaur area.
Oh, I remember. There's a distinct smell under Spaceship Earth. I'm going to take a little turn.
Yeah, go
there.
ahead.
Do you ever notice there's a distinct smell under Spaceship Earth?
At which part? I mean, because there's the burning smell.
Yeah.
When you go through...
It has this very distinct smell. I think it's part of the burning room Rome coming down, but Rome's pretty high up at that point.
Yeah.
I don't know, and it may be just the odor of the ride. Every now it wafts out through the main opening, and you're walking under there and make a right towards what was the Kodak building, Kodak photo shop, and I just remember these smells, and it was funny because I was there, I don't know, 2 years ago or so. I walked through, I'm like, there's that smell again, and certain smells just evoke certain memories in your brain. But yeah, Spaceship Earth has a distinct odor to me. It's probably just a mixture of all the different things that they've got going on in there. In terms of Universe of Energy, this one may require a little bit of research. Now, I remember a good story about the lava flow that they actually wound up using and I have to find my source on this, but they actually wound up using some sort of pump for the lava that was originally used for dog food canning or pet food canning, which was interesting. But anyway, a little tidbit there. But I'm going to guess that it's some sort of mustiness that they were piping in to simulate that era of peat and other things that were, decomposing. Now, I don't know if that's gone away. I have not been in that attraction in a while, so I don't know if that's gone away. If you look at Horizons and you look at Universe of Energy, if the smell there, and then you had Spaceship Earth, I don't doubt that there was some smell because they were trying to add to that whole experience. What do you remember? Do you remember?
Yeah, there was definitely that swampy, musty smell.
It kind of smelled like like decomposing dinosaur, I guess, and plant material, right?
And that was, but that was thanks to the smellerizer technology that they actually introduced in many attractions in Epcot. So
right.
Besides, we had Rome burning, so that was a pretty good smell. Of course, everybody's favorite, the smell of the loranges in Horizons, the mustiness. And actually, no one. I don't know if that. I'm trying to think of any other case where that technology might have leaked back out into any other theme park.
I know they used one in the Polynesian lobby because there was stories about them doing away with it like 2 years ago. I don't know what the scent was. I mean, I always thought it had a distinct smell.
To me, it smelled like just an old fountain. Yeah.
All right. Well, with the fountain coming out, one of us has got to go back and take a good deep breath and see if this...
smell construction.
That could have been the asbestos remover. You don't know.
Tiki Man will know. I'll have to ask him.
There we go. So, all right. Well, JT, who was that from again?
That was from Mark, and he emailed us on our question email, which is podcast@retrodisneyworld.com.
Excellent. So if you've got any other questions, anybody, please do send in the viewer mail. So, all right, it is time for our audio puzzler. Now, last week we played a piece, and the correct we had somebody nail it. Not only did they get the location, but they got the name. We did have other people who got the location, but we have to give the winner is Jared Toxstein. So we will we're going to have a prize for you, Jared. We're getting that all sorted out, and you will be entered in the big drawing at the end of 2015. So congratulations to you. Thanks to everybody who entered. And this week's audio puzzler, we do have a new one. And let me just get it queued up here. And all right, let's take a listen for about 15 seconds or so. Yeah, people thought you were going to get music, I bet. Everybody's looking a little baffled. I'm not sure. It's a little different. All right, so there we go. That is this week's puzzler. If you know the attraction and or area that this came from, email podcast@retrodisneyworld.com, and we'll take all correct answers and enter them into a random drawing to win a great prize. Actually, I think, how did you have something to give away
Oh, yes.
You do have something, okay?
Yeah, how about a juicy Mickey and Goofy visit the Universe of Energy comic book?
Oh, that's a
nice one.
that's a nice one. Excellent. All right, so if you would like to win that comic book, and we do have to give Jared something, so we'll get you on the flip side, Jared. Don't worry, we'll get you taken care of. We'll go through our boxes here and see what we can find for you. So, all right. So if you know the answer to this month's audio puzzler, please write in podcast at retrodisneyworld.com with your answer. Please be sure to include your name and your guess, and we'll announce it on next month's episode. All right. So the next section is film restoration. Just to let everybody know that this segment of the show is sponsored by Pixel.com. For a thoughtful once-in-a-lifetime gift, contact Pixel to create pristine digital transfers from your old home movies, photos, videotapes, and slides. And they now feature a cloud with the Reflectera app, which is really cool. It allows you to scroll through all of your photos and videos in a really concise timeline. And we're actually going to be setting one up for Retro Disney World, so you can see all the different movies we've done in a really cool timeline. So you can give Pixel a call at 818-557-3508 or visit them at pixel.com. And you can also get links to them at our ImageWorks section on retrodisneyworld.com. So this month we're going to go through two films here. And maybe in our time we only maybe get through one, but we picked these because they probably have become the number one and number two films that we've got on our site. They have the biggest hits, the most comments. People are really, really interested in them. And there's two sources of it. The 71 film was one, Brian, you found this one. This is what I call the pristine film. We mentioned it last month. This thing is just an absolute gem, taken in November 71. Disney World is brand new. It's just a gorgeous piece. And the other one is what kicked this whole restoration process off. It's a 72 film that my grandparents took on their trip to Florida. They visited all over Florida back in 72 and took a lot of good film in Disney World. And this film in particular, actually both of them both feature the frogs of the Jungle Cruise, and that's where we were able to locate the frogs because they were taken out somewhere in 72, 70, 73, somewhere in there. So let's start off with the 71. Just go a little chronological order. So it's November. The Christmas decorations are up. I don't know. This thing is just beautifully pristine. And for those playing along at home on our podcast website, you can get the links to these so you can watch. So I don't know, guys, what stands out in this one? I'm looking at the Main Street USA right now and marching band coming down the street around the 55 mark.
It's colorful to me. I just, I mean, this isn't a plug to the Pixel, but it kind of is. Like, I'm just amazed. Like, I always see these pictures, they look browned out, redded out, but this is really clear. It's like clear, like you're there, like right then.
Yep.
The pan that's, I mentioned this in the last episode, the pan that starts in front of the ice cream parlor.
Yeah, that's around 105.
It's right around the 1 minute mark. Yeah. And he just, takes you all the way across the hub, overlooking towards the bridge to Adventureland. And I mean, the park's 6 weeks old at that point. As Hal spoke about earlier, there's absolutely nothing in Tomorrowland other than what you can kind of see.
Yeah, it looks like you can actually see the Plaza Pavilion under construction.
Yeah.
Because you kind of see like a roof line next to the right of to the Circle Vision. I'm sorry, to the Circle Vision Theater.
I was wondering if that was the Plaza Pavilion, and then slightly behind that was if you had wings. So is that all Plaza Pavilion that early?
That would have been because they needed to get the restaurants going pretty quickly because there was extreme demand. So that is an amazingly huge restaurant too.
Yeah, you don't even realize how big it is.
Yeah, and the other thing you have there is the Swan Boat dock prior to Swan Boats.
Yep.
And that's the original dock before they moved it. If you remember that, it was one of the things they built, that first dock that they used for a year, and then they moved it. They built a second dock, and that one became where people sit there and eat food.
Right. So the second dock that everybody knows where the swan boats came from was over more towards Tomorrowland,
Right.
which is actually one of our other videos highlights.
Because the problem was that the crowds were spilling out in front of the Plaza restaurant,
right.
and it was becoming a traffic jam.
Yep.
So they moved it.
And just like the trees, I mean, they're not overgrown yet. They're relatively small, which means you can actually see stuff.
Yep.
It's got to look to me like when you first move into a house and then you look at that house 10 years later, like, your stuff builds up and clutter and stuff. And it's like, to me, it's like just empty. Like there's not little things anywhere. It seems like just simple.
Oh, and hey, we actually just refuted like one of our things from last week. So we went through the whole Coke Pepsi debate.
Yeah.
So I can see Coke Corner there. So Coca-Cola has sponsored that. And I forgot they also sponsored the Tomorrowland Terrace. So Tomorrowland was Coke and Frontierland was Pepsi.
Isn't that interesting?
So I love if you go around to the 205 mark, take a look at 20,000 Leagues. That water is crystal clear. You want to swim in it. It's just gorgeous.
Did they ever put the mermaids at Disney World, or was that only Disneyland? Remember you see those pictures?
I have never seen it at Disney.
The real living mermaids we're talking.
Yeah, like
okay.
people dressed up, laying there. Like,
no.
did they ever?
Don't forget, Florida had, not to get away from us here, but Florida had at Silver Springs had a mermaid attraction already. So that was pretty well known and pretty well attended too. So I don't think they wanted to.
Too many mermaids.
Yeah.
Right. The same reason they didn't want pirates there.
There you go.
St. Augustine.
Remember, that was the argument for why they wouldn't have Pirates of the Caribbean, because Florida had real pirates 200 years earlier. Why would they be interested in pirates?
That's right. Now there's a really nice view of Slow Pan again. I mean, this is what cracks me up about this guy, is that he didn't really take film of any of his family. He just kind of pans.
Too expensive.
Exactly.
Maybe he was the first lifestyler. Maybe he went alone, and
he knows what his family looks like.
That's right.
Exactly.
I don't need to show that back at home.
I paid $6 to get in here, buddy. I'm going to take pictures of this
That's
stuff.
That's right. Now the Jungle Cruise is great. When we get on there, I think that the frogs come in at the 318 mark, and they really look good. Did you guys pull them up?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I can see them. Yep. It's quick, but they're there.
Yes, they're there in all their glory.
That to me, the jungle looks very barren. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. It just seems very plain.
Well, they had to fly in a lot of those plants and stuff too. And what I thought was interesting when I first saw this. Let's see, whereabouts is it? 331. It's the African scene. It actually looks like Africa. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's barren. It looks
more like
this...
Animal Kingdom,
exactly.
than a jungle.
And that's one of my beefs. It's like, if you go back and you look at these things where, this is supposed to be the savanna. It's supposed to be the plain.
Exactly.
And there's not, like right now, there's tons and tons of trees back there.
Yeah.
And keep going to like 336 to the Lost Safari.
Mm-hmm.
The way that whole scene is staged, I mean, this is actually, to me, like brilliantly taking Mark Davis's drawing and translating it to 3D space. You have the safari, you have a very simple hill, you have the rocks and some of the other animals behind the rocks watching what's going on. You can see this thing and you can read the gag in the scene.
Oh yeah.
Very quickly. Today, that entire background is filled with trees. The trees and plants have encroached around those rocks. You can't read the gag in 5 seconds like you used to be able to do back then.
Right.
They've almost overgrown it.
They really have, because now it feels like when you go from scene to scene, or like you said, you're not seeing it, and you're just all of a sudden you pop around a tree and you see something, and then everything goes around to growth again, and then you pop around another corner and see something else. So yeah. Now the one really interesting thing I have, and I've made this comment in other locations, I'm going to make it again here. Starting around 4 minute mark there, we get the elephant bathing pool. Now, I know this was a couple weeks after opening, but you guys tell me, come on, those elephants are moving a heck of a lot better than they are today. They seem fluid. They seem more life. I don't know. Maybe it's just, I don't know. Maybe I need to compare it.
Well, compare Disneyland pirates inside Pirates of the Caribbean to Magic Kingdom pirates inside Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
there's a marked difference in how elaborately they move, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Maintenance. I have no idea what that could be. But
So, well, the rest of the film goes through some great additional pans through Liberty Square. You see one of the tour guides walking and laughing with people, and some a great shot overlooking the steamboat, the original one with 2 stacks. But going on to the second film, so the 72 film. Again, my grandparents were the ones who took this film. I hadn't seen this film in eons. This is another one where the restoration that I was able to do on the film really came out good. And on top of that, the color of my grandfather's film was well retained. He had a knack for buying cheap film and cheap processing, but for this trip he didn't. It looks like he splurged for Kodak. So there's a couple interesting points in here. I mean, what's really interesting is it starts out the same way as almost every other film with Main Street. I mean, everybody was oohed and awed about that. But he has this fantastic pan at the 157 mark. You see the old Dumbo, and you see the carousel there. He pans up to the castle, and you've got the 2 Skyway buckets crisscrossing right over the castle, and then it jumps to my grandmother coming out of the bathroom.
Hello.
Yeah, there she is. But I don't know what stands out in your mind in this. Oh, and then also too, there's this will be a little tidbit. If you watch closely at the 244, 245 mark, a nun is riding on the Skyway and comes out right before we jump to the Admiral Joe Fowler.
Awesome.
Part of what stands out to me, I mean, there's no one there. There's wide open spaces. People are moving along leisurely. There are no strollers. There's just no throngs of people anywhere. It's a pleasantly populated park.
Right.
And today you just don't see it that way.
No.
What time of the year is this?
This was July. Actually,
Wow.
I have if you can believe it. It was actually, I have it pinned down to the exact date. This was taken July 23rd, 1972. I have a travel log that my grandparents wrote, so I know the exact date.
Yeah, I mean, it does fill up when he gets a little further in there later in the day at certain points, but just like I said, the whole Fantasyland Plaza and all that. I mean, none of it is just filled with people.
Now I saw it, and this is jumping ahead,
That's
but
okay.
about 7 minutes.
Oh, you're really jumping ahead.
Yeah. We saw one of Hal's Holy Grails, the teacups without the lid on it.
That's right. They are in there.
excellent.
Yeah. All right, hold on. You're going to jump ahead on me. I got to go back.
Boiling teacups.
Go ahead.
Okay, where was I? Now I'm all screwed. Oh, I know. The keelboat. Check out the shot of the birth of May at 3:53. I mean, my grandfather did a great slow pan right up there. You've got the guy a cast member in character leaning against it, the rigging on it. Just a beautiful shot. And then obviously you have additional shots of Tom Sawyer Island in the background, and you get the cabin burning when they're on this stuff. So a lot of really neat stuff there. There is a group of people that has appeared in a couple films I've restored, and it's a band that they can be seen around the 420 mark, all dressed in red. One of them looks like Tattoo from Fantasy Island. Does anybody know what that band was?
The plane.
the band. How do you know what that band was?
I'm trying to get back to the video.
Okay. We've lost How here.
We're all streaming so hard right now.
Yeah,
Killing the Vimeos.
I'm out of
there they
I'm
are,
out of
red
HD
jackets.
to pull this stuff up.
So yeah, they're in red jackets.
What land are they in?
They were playing in Frontierland, actually, at the very fringe, actually, over by Tom Sawyer Island, where it gets to close to the Frontierland Railroad Station. But they've appeared in some other films, riding in one of the jitney buses in the parades, and they definitely have appeared. But they're wearing all these red suit jackets. For a non-Disney retro thing, when you get to the 441 mark, there's girls wearing these hats that look like they should be working at Corn Dog. It's pretty funny.
And they got Pepsi cups in their hands.
Didn't notice. Oh yeah, look at that. Pepsi it is. So
Chip and Dale kind of look duck-billed platypus to me with that nose.
yeah, it's a little different. Well, it was funny. I have the Look magazine out, and it was the Look magazine from April 1971. So this is pre-opening, and it's got Mickey on the cover. My son comes down and sees it today, and he goes, "Oh, so is that what Mickey looked like back in the day?" It's like,
Yeah, he had regular
hands.
hands.
He's like, he has whiskers. I'm like, no, those are just folds in his cheeks. But
Where did all these totem poles go? That's what I'd like to know. At about a little bit
so-
earlier, 5 minutes.
yeah,
So originally they're hanging out to the left of the Frontierland train station.
yeah, that's the 457 mark for those playing at home.
A little. So after the Frontierland train station goes away and Splash Mountain gets built, those get relocated to the banks of the rivers of America, close to the boat launch.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah, that's kind of a neat spot there too, where before.
Reminds me of Fort Wilderness is what it reminds me.
And what a great little train station.
Yeah.
Yeah, just simple.
So that's probably, so that train station's got some history, or at least that design.
Enlighten us how.
Okay, so that train station started out. Now it's not the same one. So that basic design started out in the Walt Disney film "So Dear to My Heart," and Ward Kimball was doing his full-size backyard railway before Walt was doing any full-size scheme. So apparently Walt said, "Hey Ward, you want this thing?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll take it." So he packed it up and he moved it over to his house and put it in his Grizzly Flats railroad station. And then when Walt was building Disneyland, he approached Ward Kimball and said, "Hey, remember that station? Can I have that back?"
I kind of need that.
And Ward was like, "No, you can't have that." So they rebuilt it again and put it back in Disneyland. And this is a close copy of it here in Walt Disney World. But that railroad station also appears in Epcot Center in the American Adventure. During the Two Brothers sequence.
Interesting.
And apparently when they were going to film that, they were trying to find an old-fashioned railroad depot that they could use. But they were concerned that that tourists might come and flood that railroad depot, trying to find the same place that they shot the Epcot film. So they decided to just sort of close off that area at Disneyland one night and dress it and use it for that shot.
Look at that. No, there's your trivia for the night. That's pretty cool. So now I got an email from somebody commented once on one of these films here. I think it was at the 536 mark. They said, "Did the train go around the park differently? I can see the Contemporary from the back of the train."
Oh yeah.
There was no Tomorrowland.
There was no Tomorrowland. There was nothing, and you could see straight through. When you going back, since Tomorrowland is our theme here, when you think about that for a second, that you could see the Contemporary from Tomorrowland. I mean, that's kind of a little bit of brilliant architecture there. Now, we all knew Tomorrowland was always on the right-hand side, even at Disneyland, but it was a perfect place for it. And until things really grew in, and Space Mountain and Carousel Progress and all those came up, you wouldn't be able to see it. People are probably wondering why we didn't touch on Carousel Progress tonight, too. That's got a whole...
Except for me claiming it as my favorite Tomorrowland
that's right.
attraction.
But we'll touch based on that at a later date. There's some great Main Street vehicle shots around the 6 mark. And then we get into one of my favorite parts, actually, and it brings up the Skyway. It's a pretty decent segment, a lengthy segment of riding the Skyway over Fantasyland, over 20,000 leagues. This all kicks off around 6:30 something or so. But yeah, let's see, where are your teacups are coming in right around. See, I'm over 20,000 leagues right now. There's the waterfalls. Did you find them? There they are. 7:02. Operating and everything.
Boom.
Now, there's a really great shot here. Let's see if we can get the exact point. The construction is going on at this point for Tomorrowland. And if you pause it at around, let's see, 7:25, 7:26.
Big mound
of dirt. Yeah, and that location. Now you can see dancers on a stage. We talked about a stage. This was more of a temporary stage that they had set up. If you notice the color of the wall, the pink, the yellow, and the orange pretty much matches the bags of the day. But if you look at that stage at 7:27 with the dancers on, it's temporary. I mean, that was, you could see pretty much behind it is just trailers put together. And that blue shack exists to this day and is still there. We did some reconnaissance photos on that. But yeah, really, if you go through that 7:20 to 7:23, and then at 7:30, you can actually start to see what was built at the people mover, and how it was just walled off.
It was dead. It was a dead end. It was great. Right at the end of the buildings for Mission to Mars and the America the Beautiful.
Exactly. So, and then you get a great view of coming into the Tomorrowland Skyway station.
My favorite part of that descent into the station is that you've got a bucket full of Navy men in front of you in uniform,
sailors.
And then there's more sailors in the queue off to the right, like another group of them waiting to get on. And they stand out obviously because they're in their Navy.
I never even noticed the ones in queue over the right-hand side. Yeah, so it must have been something was in port that day.
Well, that's
actually, there was a naval training center in Orlando, so that was probably an easy place for them to come over and have a day off.
My Uncle Tom spent 22 years in the Navy. He joined in 1978, and I asked him if he had ever been to Disney World, and he said one time when I was in the Navy, we went for the day. Okay,
Interesting. So more Jungle Cruise. You can find the frogs again around 8:27. They're in there again. Those damn frogs keep coming back and back. So, but and the frog. There's also another clip in here. There was people talking about the alligator crying. How have you heard about that on the Jungle Cruise?
I think I read something about that recently, but you'll have to refresh.
So
my
there's this saying about a crocodile crying, and there was people saying, "Oh no, in the Jungle Cruise, it's not. It's just a leak that nobody fixed." Well, if you go back, I mean, here we have a film from 1972. It's about the 9:14 mark. You can see an alligator crying from its eyes, and to this day, there's even I even have a clip of something recent where the alligator is still crying. So it is a play on the term alligator crying or crocodile crying. I forget what crocodile tears. There you go. But yeah, and I don't know if this is one of those subtle little jokes with the elephant, the baby elephants making the alligator cry. I don't know what it is, but if you know, it's not just he squirts it out. It's like tears coming out pretty intensely.
It's right when the mouth goes down too. That's odd.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so you've got the two total movies there. You've got a good 15 minutes of watching. And guys, I think we're going to wrap it up for this month's episode. So this was we do have to pick something for next time around. I have an idea. I was going to say let's how you kind of picked this one, right? This is your Tomorrowland one. Let's pass the torch. I have an idea, but I don't want to get in the way here. JT, have you looked over our list? And for those listeners out there, I have no less than about 64 different potential topics, and this does not include things that are popping up as we're talking. This does not include things that are going to come up as we talk. So 64, you do the math. We've got over 5 years at one per month, so we got plenty to talk about. But JT, what's burning? What is something you got to talk about?
I'm a big resort person. So what are your do you narrow it down to a specific
if we give
resort,
it to, give it Polynesian, then Hal's just going to get two in 1 month.
Yeah, so let's pick a resort then. What do we
I think at a protest we should not talk about the Polynesian again until they've finished their reimagining of it.
To see how it comes out. All right, well,
yeah.
Oh yeah, we'll have to do a live remote from Trader Sam's then.
I'm for that.
All right.
Well, why don't we do we'll do the contemporary then. We'll talk about the contemporary. The golf resort is another one.
Will JT get to do his U.S. Steel voice again during that podcast?
Like a chest,
like a chest of drawers sliding into a cupboard, or how they say,
That's right. And today is actually the anniversary of Nixon's "I am not a crook" speech.
Yes, I saw that.
The conference of municipal governments or something he was addressing down
And
there.
for some more interesting history, I didn't even realize. I should have looked this up. Did you guys know we released our podcast about 4 or 5 days short of the anniversary when Walt Disney World was announced to the general public?
How about that?
We were just short. So the whole pre-opening theme was pretty close.
Almost.
But going back to U.S. Steel and Contemporary, I read some really interesting information. There's an article in, it was the New York Times magazine or Look magazine I was reading today, and it's written from an architect's point of view, but it goes into how successful or unsuccessful, we'll reveal that next week, that whole plan was, the chest of drawers, as JT calls it.
Yes.
So,
built on site, driven by truck.
that's right.
the
So
whole
we'll
deal.
talk about that next time. There's some great stuff on it. So, all right. So with that, we want to thank Pixel.com for sponsoring us. As always, you can get all of your photos and memories restored there. Visit Pixel.com, or you can give them a call at 1-800-557-3508. They will go ahead and transfer your home movies, photos, videotapes, and slides. And JT's had a few done, and they've come out great. So,
It's
yeah.
awesome. It's like I watched them like an old VHS conversion done, and then I compared to what Pixel did, and it was just like night and day. Unbelievable stuff what
There
they
you
can
go.
do.
And we also do have another sponsor, wdwmap.com. Actually, if you click the link off our homepage on the right-hand side, they have actually recreated the Paul Hartley map. If you don't know what the Paul Hartley map is, if you look at it, you'll certainly remember it. It's the most colorful and I don't want to call it cartoonish, but this map used to hang on the walls inside the Contemporary and the Polynesian in the guest rooms, and they now can command quite a bit of money if you can get your hand on the original. The originals were painted on Masonite, but www.map.com has gone ahead and reproduced this and is selling them in all different sizes of printed on canvas and stretched canvas. But use the link off our website on the right-hand side. Scroll down to www.map.com, click that link, and you'll get 10% off your order. And finally, I guess, guys, let's see. Twitter, everybody knows where to find us at Retro WDW. How, JT, Brian, want to tell them where you guys are all at?
You can find me at Brian P. Miles. That's Brian and Miles, both with an I.
No.
You can find me at Liquid Luau on Twitter. And if you like Disney audio, come check out all the stuff that I recorded at kingdomofmemories.lakua.com. That's LAUKUA.com.
You know how we're going to have to
I
get you
am.
like a vanity domain, just like how.retrodisneyworld.com to forward people to that one. JT.
I'm at LS1JT on Twitter.
There we go.
So if you want to see my randomness,
Everybody
go
can
ahead.
follow all of our Disney charades through the month. So with that, folks, we appreciate all of our listeners for listening. Again, you can find us on iTunes, Podbean, and for more information on our entire podcast, it's retrodisneyworld.com/podcast. Appreciate everybody listening. And hey, Brian, take us out.
Until next time, kindly move all the way to the end of the aisle, filling in all available spaces.
Thank you much. Perfect. Have a great night, everyone.
So it's home again and home again, America for me. My heart is turning home again, and there I long to be. In the land of youth and freedom beyond the ocean's bars, where the air is full of sunlight and the flag is full of stars. America.